Welcome to Radio 4's Consumer Programme today, why removal firms want to ban people buying houses from exchanging contracts and completing the sale on the day they move. How William Morris prints are finding their way into all our lives. Buttons, anyone?
We make thousands and thousands and thousands of buttons every year, and the buttons that are definitely most popular are the William Morris Arts and Crafts range.
And remember this.
Hello?
Most working public payphones have gone, but some still remain. We'll be explaining who gets to keep theirs. And if you'd like to share a memory of an important call from a public phone box, we'd love to hear it. Email us or text us. The text is 84844. Email you and yours at bbc.co.uk. Removal firms are asking the government to ban the practice of people who are buying houses, exchanging contracts and completing the sale on the day they move in. They say this simultaneous exchange and completion is happening more often and resulting in chaos. Exchanging contracts is where the buyer and seller agree to the sale and it's legally binding. Completion is the final step, where ownership transfers and the full cost of the house is paid. Any delay in paperwork and money transfers is leaving people with their furniture packed up in lorries, unable to collect the keys and move the furniture into their new home. Well, one of our listeners, Phil, recently moved house from North London to Surrey, and he told us what happened.
I was moving from northwest London down to near Gatwick Airport in Surrey, and for the most part, the moving experience was pretty good. The company I was using were very good. They did a great job. Nothing was damaged, and the lads were good, and everything else. It's just that the only big glitch was on the day we arrived at the new property, and I went to the estate agent office and ended up sitting there for maybe 2.5 hours waiting for the money to clear from the people who were buying my property, waiting for the money to come through so that the whole thing could be finalised. And by the end of that kind of couple of hours, I kept getting calls from the head guy of the moving company saying, look, what's the hold up? Kind of blaming me for it or making out that it was my fault, and then threatening to have his lads take the van full of my contents back to their depot in North London and then re-deliver it the following week at an extra cost of like £1,300 or so. And then he says, or what are we going to do about it? Like he was kind of soliciting an amount, what was I prepared to offer to make his lads stay? So I offered him £300 in cash because he had 3 lads on the van. And then he came back and said, it'll be 400. In other words, he wanted to include himself in the cash bonus. And once I'd done that, then they completed the job, and it didn't take them long to unload the van. And off they went back to North London. It's just the whole thing of the delay in the financial transaction caused this extra hiccup, which you don't need that on the day that you're moving house. It was my buyer's bank that held up the whole thing. The money wouldn't clear into wherever it has to go before it is used for the purchase of my property, kind of thing. £400 isn't very much money compared with what you're dealing with when you're buying and selling houses, but it was an unnecessary incident on the day when you don't need anything more to worry about. I think it'd be something that could be eliminated if the process was slightly different.
Well, that's Phil in Surrey. Well, the process might be about to become very different. The government at Westminster is consulting on proposals to reform the system for buying and selling houses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And the idea is to bring it in line with what already happens in Scotland, where offers are binding and the exchange of contracts happens sooner. The British Association of Removers wants a 10 working day window between exchange and completion and guaranteed access to keys at 1 p.m. as part of any changes. And it says its members are reporting keys not being released until 5 o'clock on moving days. John Burridge is the managing director of Richardson Moving and Storage. It's a family removal firm in Stockton-on-Tees. John, hi. You wrote to us about this problem of exchange and completion and moving all happening on the same day. Tell us what that can be like from the removal men's point of view.
Hi, Winifred. I think the first issue really is the impact that it has on our business outside of that moving day. For example, staff retention. It's a real issue getting good staff these days. And this exchange and completion on the same day and the delays means that we can't give our staff notice that they're going to be working late. And that's a real horrible issue for us.
The body that represents the conveyancers, the lawyers, the property lawyers, it told us that they prefer to leave a gap between exchange and completion, and they say that all of it happening on the same day is the exception rather than the rule. But you're saying that's not what you see.
I think it is the exception rather than the rule, but it is far too frequent. I would say it probably happens in about 25% of our the moves that we carry out, and it's just awful for us. It's awful for the client on the day. It's just a real horrible process. Moving is a date-specific industry, so we're not like an electrician where we can say, "Oh, sorry, we're a bit busy today. We can't come. We'll come tomorrow." We have to be at the right place at the right time. And if there's a delay and we can't use that truck the next day because it's full, it has real implications for us. It's such a challenge. And as the the previous person who explained his moving experience.
Phil, yeah.
It's terrible for them. It's so stressful. I have to say, I think the way he was dealt with wasn't particularly professional, but it was so stressful for the client and for the mover.
What are you doing to try to manage it? Because in some cases, people just don't get their keys, do they? I mean, he didn't. He didn't get his keys on the day, Phil, in Surrey.
So we've changed completely the way that we work, especially with moves that are more than, say, that would take a total of 6 hours. We've changed it in that we will part loads the day before the non-essentials, and on the day of the move, we'll just load the essentials. And then when the keys come through, we'll deliver the essentials, make the client habitable overnight, and then deliver the bulk in the next morning. Clients actually quite like that, but it has put the cost of moving up. It's the client that is paying for all this in the end.
You told us that the fact that everyone wants to move on a Friday to give themselves the weekend to unpack, that adds to what you call opportunities for disaster. In what way?
So the way that we do this here, it means that if the truck then has to be loaded for the entire weekend. Solicitors aren't, if there's a problem, solicitors aren't open on a Saturday, banks aren't open on a Saturday, so nothing happens until the Monday.
Well, a lot of money is obviously wasted in the current housing market through delays and through sales
Absolutely.
that fall through. So the Bank Santander, they recently commissioned some research looking into just how much money is wasted. Let me bring in Graham Seller, he's the head of mortgages. Graham, tell us, what did your research show then about the amount of money that is wasted, the number of sales that fall through?
Yeah, it is very stressful, as been outlined. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is there's about 1.2 million properties bought and sold in the UK every year, and that's about 20,000 a week. So it's a very robust process. Lots of people do move, but I think some of the things outlined here do point to how stressful it is and how many transactions are actually lost. And I think our research shows that roughly 1 in 3 transactions breaks down, and that's not just on the last day, as explained here. That's right from when you buy the house at the estate agent, when you go for your mortgage, and all the way through the conveyancing process. And all of that lost money, the government sort of report that was costing the economy about £400 million a year. But that £400 million is the cost for the conveyancing not working or not having to be there, and the removal cost is outlined there. But there's so many other costs which are hidden. It's the amount of time wasted in your own leisure time, how many hours you're trying to get the process to work while you're at work. And when we add all the bits together, it's about £1.5 billion of cost to the UK economy. So it's vast, and I think it goes much, much further than just the last day of the removal.
Have you noticed this thing that John Burridge wrote to us about? And he wasn't the only remover who wrote to us to say this business of the day of exchange and completion being the same day and being removal day, and that day tending to be a Friday.
Yeah, I mean, Fridays have always been the traditional day to move. I mean, if you go right back in time, it was because you had the weekend to get your new house sorted out, etc. But often the last Friday of the month's the busiest day as well, because it used to fall, well, it still falls after payday. So people like to complete on the last Friday. They knew what their first payment was going to be for their mortgage. It just made sense. But you do then get these bottlenecks, as been suggested, and Fridays is probably still a bottleneck. What I would say, though, is we've seen a lot of technology developments in the home moving process. So, in terms of when you go for your mortgage these days, lenders like Santander will get your mortgage offer out in sort of 5 or 6 days, which is much quicker than it used to be. And the offers get to our solicitors or the acting solicitors online, electronically, and the certificate of titles get sent in electronically. But I think what all that means is because technology has made certain parts of the process slicker, you are getting maybe these later exchanges and completions, because certainly 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was always 7 days between exchange and completion. So everyone knew it was going to happen the next week. But as outlined by both Phil, and John, that definitely seeing some more examples of exchange and completion taking place later, and that adds the stress to everyone because you don't know it's going to happen until the very last moment.
As well as John writing, we had a lot of listeners who were home movers describing this horrible thing where your home is in a lorry and then you're a removal van and then you're waiting for the keys. You're waiting for your lawyer to say that to the estate agent, give this person their keys, and that the day goes on, and you can go to 5 o'clock and beyond. I mean, from the bank side, why does that happen, that the funds are held up in that way?
Yeah, I think when you're buying a home and you see, where you're the first time buyer and you're buying your very first home, or you're the first time seller and you're selling a home and buying a home, I think sometimes it's hard to see that there's a lot more people involved than just yourself. So, if you take a typical chain where a first time buyer is buying a house being sold for the first time, and a mover's upsizing, and there's a right sizer at the end, downsizing perhaps, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 estate agents in the chain. You're probably going to have 3 or 4 different solicitors in the chain. You may well have 3 or 4 mortgage brokers helping in the chain, and you may have 3 or 4 banks or building societies in the chain. So there are so many parties taking part, and as the chain gets bigger, the more and more parties are in the chain, making the whole thing more difficult. So I think from a bank or a building society individual point of view, it's often hard to see where the problem lies, because we as a bank, we want to release that money as quickly as we can on the completion day, get the customers into their home. But sometimes if we don't get the paperwork from the solicitor, or there's a hold up with another part of the chain, that can cause the problem. So it's not always obvious where the problem lies.
Do you favour what the removal men want? They want a ban on this simultaneous exchange and completion on moving day, and they want the keys to always be there by 1 o'clock on the removal day.
Well, we at Santander welcome the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government's 12-week consultation, because they are seeing there's a problem, they're acting, and there's a consultation open between the 6th of October and the 29th of December. And I would urge everybody who has got sort of interest in this space, all of us who have moved house perhaps, to put forward what would work. And certainly exchange and completion on the same day is one issue, but there's lots of other issues in home buying, right from how the conveyancer has to do the searches to checking, make sure certificates are up in the right place, and the legally binding contracts and gazumping and all the other stuff that people know about. I think the fact the government are actually having this consultation, certainly that's one aspect it should be looked at, but I think there's a lot of things we can do to make it better.
John Burridge, do you feel hopeful the government will make the changes that you want?
Well, we've had the Home Buying and Selling Council that's been working on this. The British Association of Removers have been working with them for about 10 years, I think, and nothing seems to have happened. But this seems to be like a sea change and sort of a movement that hopefully we can all get behind, because the stress that it puts under the people that are moving on the day and the movers is quite unacceptable.
Okay.
We get lots of people who are distraught with the things that go on their moving day.
Thanks so much.
It really does need to change.
John Burridge from Richardson Moving and Storage, and Graham Seller from Santander. Thank you both for that. I asked at the start about your memories of using payphones, because we're going to be talking about them later. We've just had this lovely message from Sue Stennett. She says, aged 11, I was given 4 pennies by my teacher to go down to the village street to the phone box to ring my parents to tell them that I had passed the 11 plus. That was back in 1958. Keep those messages coming. There's some good news this morning about inflation. Inflation held steady in the year to September at 3.8%. That is the third month in a row it's remained unchanged. 3.8% is still not great. The Bank of England target is 2%. But this time, in among the figures, food price inflation held steady too. In fact, it fell very slightly. It was the first fall in food price inflation since May of last year. The soaring cost of food has been a big pressure on households, because obviously food's an essential. It's not something you can keep cutting back on. Here's what the chief economist at the Office for National Statistics, Grant Fitzner, had to say about it.
Now, it's only a 0.2% fall in the month for food prices, and they are still running quite high at 4.5%. But I think the fact that we've seen that steady increase dip a little is encouraging. Of course, that's just 1 month's number, so we'll have to see what transpires in future months. But nonetheless, a small glimmer of hope there, I think.
We all see it at the checkout, don't we? This rising price of food. And across social media, people have been posting pictures of a £100 weekly shop. They're shocked by how little they're getting for their money. Our reporter Johnny Bentley asked some shoppers out in Manchester what they are spending on food.
I'm talking about a family of 4, 150 to 200 a week.
£80.
80 quid? What does your household look?
It's just myself.
Just yourself?
80 pounds-ish a week.
How many people's in the house?
Just me.
Just you?
Yeah.
200 quid.
200 quid a week?
For a family of 4.
Yeah.
We used to use Sainsbury's, then we went to Aldi for the meats and things like that, but we started going to Aldi because it was cheaper, same price as Sainsbury's. I think they're all much of a muchness these days.
Many of the cheap ones like Little, Aldi and sometimes Sainsbury's, just because it's nearby though.
And even with the cheaper ones, it's still approaching nearly £100 for someone who's just living by themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I tend to go between Lidl and Aldi. I do both, but steer away from the bigger supermarket chains.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the cost of it's making you cut back a little bit on other things?
Yeah, less things like takeaways and nights out and things like that.
Well, I think we cut back in other ways because we value eating healthy food, so we don't go out as much.
A lot of frozen things are more affordable, but if you want fresh, then it's more expensive.
So there's a social media trend that's been going around saying that the £100 weekly food shops now become the norm, and people are going, But I guess that's not too surprising to you.
No, definitely not.
Well, no, I mean, I've got 2 young kids, so we're feeding 4 adults. So 50 quid each a week isn't a lot of money.
I would say why I'm not shocked in terms of being surprised. I'm definitely shocked that it's gotten that bad.
Steak has gone mad, cheese has gone mad. Just trying to think.
The world's gone mad.
The world's gone mad. Manchester's mad.
Well, let me bring in 2 people who can shed some light on the madness. Niamh Leonard Bedwell is the food editor at The Grocer magazine, and Richard Werner is Professor of Economics at the University of Winchester. Hi both and welcome both. Professor Werner, if food price inflation has steadied in the latest set of figures, they covered the year to September, inflation was still rising, wasn't it, at 3.8%? Which prices went right up?
Right. Some commentators have emphasised that, transport is down month on month, And some items, food, non-alcoholic beverages, is down slightly month on month, but the month-to-month figures usually distorted by seasonal adjustment. It's a very short comparison horizon. So one should look at the year-on-year figures. That's where overall inflation is still up 3.8%. That is a lower inflation rate than the previous month year-on-year. But if you look at the breakdown, especially transport shows us it's up more than in the previous month year-on-year. So transport is up also 3.8%. In August, it was only it was only 2.4%. So on the year-on-year comparison, it's clear we still have inflation. We still have a lot of items that are very important to people. I mean, this is a consumer price index where prices are still rising. Still up almost 4% on top. This is on top of all the rises we've seen since 2020, And of course, there was a big surge in late 21 and 22, almost reaching double-digit inflation. And that's been due to the central bank printing money like crazy. And the general population is still paying the price for that. So there's been since then, a sort of a settling back of the still positive inflation rate, but that's not really something to celebrate. And as you said, it's way above, it's almost double still the target that the Bank of England has set for itself, 2%. So we're still not performing. The general public still has to pay much more for daily items, necessary items. And it's very regressive, ordinary people are being asked to fork out. When you're rich and super rich, there's many ways to avoid negative inflation effects, but ordinary people are being punished here. Is that really good? No. And I think we do need to review the way monetary policy has been done. There's never been a proper assessment of why the Bank of England created so much inflation through its crazy policies in 2020.
So this is still a big hangover from the crash. Exactly. And what happened after the crash. Neem Leonard Bedwell from the Grocer magazine. Rising food bills have been a huge shock in this cost of living squeeze, along with the price of energy. Tell us what the supermarket's saying about these price pressures. What's been driving the costs upwards for such a long time?
I think it's quite a complex issue to unpick. I think a lot of the food manufacturers that we've spoken to in recent months have been really grappling with increases in energy prices and also increased ingredient costs. And a lot of things can cause that, from kind of climate change to geopolitical kind of issues that are ongoing. And at the end of the day, those businesses still are trying to make a profit. So, the food manufacturers might be passing on cost increases to the supermarkets, and then the supermarkets are still trying to make their margins as well. So we're just seeing these prices kind of creep up and up and up. And like some of your shoppers that we just heard from are saying, that's really impacting them on a weekly basis when they're doing their grocery shop.
Neem, those shoppers mentioned the price of meat and dairy. You mentioned climate change, and there's a really interesting piece on the BBC News website this morning. It's by our economics editor, Faisal Islam. He looks at orange juice. Now, the price of orange juice has more than doubled in 5 years. A big factor in that, he says, is climate change. Here in the UK, we're coming out of a very dry summer, aren't we? Do you think that will affect the prices in the shops this autumn?
Definitely. I think obviously when you see a year or two of poor crops in whatever sort of product that impacts, it can have a knock-on effect on prices. I've been looking into quite a lot. There's been massive inflationary pressures on cocoa. So the world globally, we kind of rely on West Africa, so the Ivory Coast and Ghana for our cocoa supply. And they've had a really poor crop recently, so that has pushed up the price of chocolate massively. And we're actually seeing a lot of brands kind of shrink the size of their products, but not bring down the prices to try and kind of mitigate that.
Those shoppers in Manchester mentioned meat and dairy. What's been the problem with them? Why have they risen so much in price?
I think, again, it's quite a complex matter to unpick, but I think particularly with dairy, if you kind of have poor weather and the cattle can't sort of ruminate as much, that can impact the quality and the yield. So there's a few factors like that. And then obviously kind of even going back to kind of feed prices and those increasing, that can have a knock-on impact as well. And all the ingredients that are used in the feed are under pressure as well. So it's quite a complex one to unpick, but like you say, kind of meat and dairy are two of those categories that have been under quite a bit of pressure.
Professor Werner, If it turns out that inflation has stopped rising, might there be interest rate cuts later this year? I mean, that at least will help people who are having to renegotiate their mortgages, won't it? But it won't be good for savers.
Yes, that room exists. Interest rates, don't need to stay high. I doubt, though, that we'll see a decisive action from the Bank of England. They probably want to see more data, and particularly they might want to argue, well, we need to see evidence of what the economy itself is doing, the real economy, not just sort of the price movements. Um, and and I mean, overall, the question is, what is the goal of monetary policy? I mean, do we really want economic growth? Well, if so, then the Bank of England should really allow the creation of community banks, because that funds small firms, that creates jobs and growth. But so far, it's been somewhat adverse to that idea. So maybe it doesn't really want growth. A lot of central banks are buying into this argument. We need zero growth, degrowth. Is this what they're doing? We'll see. I mean, their actions tell what they're really intending to do. And so far, inflation has been their goal. I mean, Marvin King, who was governor, has actually quite rightfully criticized that inflation policy, creating intentional inflation, through the 2020 massive money printing. But are these the right goals? So we need to revisit the role of the central bank. Should it work for the people, or should it work for some other nefarious globalist goals or other things it may be doing?
Okay,
and at the moment, it's quite independent.
If I could just interrupt, sorry, Niamh, we're in this golden quarter, aren't we now, for the shops, the run-up to Christmas. Briefly, if you would, how will the supermarkets compete to win our custom?
I think you're going to see a lot of competition from the supermarkets to offer kind of competitive loyalty pricing. So lots of offers on things like alcohol and boxes of chocolates, mince pies, all those kind of seasonal products. And they're going to be really driving the price of those down to sort of lure shoppers through the doors.
Yeah, it's a good time to stock up if you can afford it, Niamh, isn't it? But as Professor Werner said, those who can't afford it, they're always the most hard hit. Thanks both for that. Thank you. Now, one of our listeners got in touch wanting to warn other people after she had been on the wrong end of a scam involving gig tickets. Emma Morrison from South London wanted to buy 4 Radiohead tickets for her daughter and her daughter's 2 friends. She thought she'd found someone on social media with unwanted tickets to sell, but she was scammed out of £640. The offer of the tickets was posted by someone who joined a WhatsApp group for local dog walkers that Emma belongs to.
So the tickets were for a Radiohead concert. And the people who had popped up on the WhatsApp group said they were very disappointed that they could no longer attend as they were going to be overseas, wanted to make sure that some real diehard fans got hold of them and that they weren't got hold of by scalpers. So I put my hand up and was first in the queue to purchase those tickets. The tickets were £135 each, and there was an additional cost further down the line of the transaction of £25 per ticket to change the name of the lead booker with Ticketmaster. The transaction was taking a really long time. I was probably talking to this person back and forth on WhatsApp for 90 minutes between swapping, bank account numbers, full name, email address, which they needed to input to Ticketmaster, them sending back screenshots of Ticketmaster, processing the request, and then it was just pending. Nothing was showing up in my Ticketmaster account. I was liaising with the other party saying, should I be worried that it's taking so long? And they came back very reassuring, saying, oh, you know what these big ticket websites are like. They take a long time. It wasn't until another person on the original WhatsApp chat had expressed an interest in having the tickets that I'd messaged them privately to say, I wouldn't go down that route just yet because it's been 90 minutes and I still don't have anything. At which point they immediately flagged on the group that there might be a scammer in the midst, and that's when the person disappeared, and as did all the chat. It's not clear how they got into the WhatsApp group. It is a monitored group, and there are admins who allow people to join or not. It's unsure. We didn't manage to find that out because the party that was posting on the group left it straight away. So there was no kind of clear path as to how they got in there, but they certainly knew how to exit quick smart. And the key learning for me was that you can't trust anybody anywhere, which is a bit of a revelation and not a good one.
Emma Morrison, well, thankfully Emma did get her money back. She got it back from the bank. She was among an estimated 7 million people in the UK scammed in the last 12 months. That figure comes from research published this week by Citizens Advice. Now, it surveyed more than 2,000 people and found that online shopping, including scams on social media, are the most common kind of fraud. Mike Andrews is the National Coordinator for the National Trading Standards e-crime team. He's in charge of a group that works to disrupt criminals and prosecute offenders involved in crimes like ticket scams. Mike, hi. Are you having much success with it, would you say?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I would say that we are having some success, as the listener alluded to in the interview. It is a widespread problem, everything from ticketing to counterfeit goods to unsafe products which can cause real harm to people. It is a significant issue, but we're having some really good success in terms of trying to disrupt that activity, either by taking down websites or having harmful content removed from social media platforms.
How do criminals infiltrate social media groups like the one that Emma was in for the local dog walkers? You know, it's a curated group. Someone in that group has to allow you in.
They do, but unfortunately, again, it's a common tactic that we're seeing, whether it's a WhatsApp group, whether it's a buy and sell group on social media. I think the criminals see this as fertile ground because there's an element of trust. If you're a member of that group, then the other members of the group will likely trust you, and the criminals will prey on that trust. So it's important that the people who administer those groups, the people who decide who isn't allowed into the group, need to be really vigilant about making sure that the people who they let in are who they say they are, and they're not just trying to get in for nefarious purposes.
Do they go for particular groups of people on social media?
The evidence we have doesn't suggest it's particular groups, but there is an element of where it's some sort of social group. So like your caller has said about the dog walking group, groups like that where there's a social element, there's probably a great deal of trust between members of the group. Criminals are far more likely to exploit that type of activity.
They're so plausible, aren't they, these people? You know, you choose the dog walking group because everyone there, you know, trusts a fellow dog lover. I mean, they're so dedicated at what they do. Can you ever tell the difference on social media then between someone who genuinely has got some tickets they no longer want and someone who's determined to rob you?
It's extremely difficult because, as I'm sure all your listeners will know, it's really easy to sign up to a social media platform. There's very little checks and balances in place. So if somebody wants to pretend they are somebody else and that they're acting for entirely innocent purposes, it's a relatively easy thing to do. So our advice is always any form of social media, and we would include in that WhatsApp and messaging systems, you should always be really, really careful in terms of who you're speaking to, even if it appears to be somebody who is a member of your community. And we realise that's a difficult thing to say because people build up trust within these groups, but an element of caution is always necessary. And particularly, as was described by your listener, when they try to divert you away from that community into a private WhatsApp conversation, that is a big red flag for us because that's something that the criminals will constantly try and do.
Would you buy on social media anything?
Personally, no. And I think that's the key message.
Yeah.
That's the key message we would give to all consumers. Be really, really careful with anything that you want to buy on social media because sadly there are too many criminals out there to try and exploit consumers' trust.
Mike Andrews, head of the National Trading Standards e-crime team. Thank you. Now, when was the last time you used a public payphone? We had an email from a listener who was disappointed to hear that the payphone at his local railway station is being decommissioned. He told us he regularly uses it to let his partner know that he's on his way home. He lets the phone ring 3 times and puts the receiver down. It's something his own parents used to do 60 years ago. Well, he didn't want to come on the programme today, but it got us thinking about who still uses payphones and why. There are around 13,000 working public phone boxes left in the UK. 2 years ago, there were 20,000. At their peak in the 1990s, there were around 100,000. Well, earlier this year, the public phone box in the village of North Nibley in Gloucestershire was saved after a local campaign, and I've been speaking to Charlie Garside. He's 15, he uses it. His mum was one of the people who fought to keep it. He rang me from the box.
Hello?
Hello, is that Charlie?
Yeah, that's me.
Hi, it's Winifred. I know you're in the village phone box now. Tell us what it looks like.
Big red phone box located next to a main road, and it's got a free to call phone box inside of it.
Is it a big, heavy, old-fashioned black phone?
It is a big, heavy, old-fashioned black phone, yeah.
It used to smell like cigarettes in my day. What does it smell like now?
Doesn't really smell like much, to be honest.
That's probably an improvement. Tell us what you use the phone box for.
So when I go up Nibley mountain biking with my friends, we tend to break our bikes or crash quite often. And so when that happens, there's not much signal up at the top of Nibley, and so we come down to the bottom because we know that there's a phone box down here that we can call the parents on.
And they come and collect you?
Yeah.
What was it like for you when you first started to use an old-fashioned phone box?
Well, the first time I used it was when I was on my bike up at Nibley and broke it, and then went down to one of the 2 phone boxes that's at the bottom of Nibley. But I was trying, because I didn't know the phone boxes were there, so I was trying to call my parents on my phone, but I had no signal. And then spotted the red phone box and thought I'd give it a try. And yeah, it worked, and my dad came and got me.
Big relief.
Yeah, definitely, because I couldn't call him. I was going up and down the road trying to find signal, but there was nothing, and then found the red phone box.
What would have happened if that phone box wasn't there?
I probably would have had to push my bike back a couple miles to Charfield.
Would you put your mum on? I know her name is Alicia.
Yeah, I'll put her on now.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi, Alicia.
Hello.
Hi. How important is it for you that Charlie can contact you using that proper traditional phone box?
Oh, I think it is absolutely invaluable to have these red phone boxes around the country. When our kids were little, we used to actually call their grandma from a phone box wherever we went, just so they could actually understand how a phone works outside of, your mobile phone. Because nobody knows even how to dial a phone number anymore, because we just press someone's name and it does all the work for us. So, yeah, to have this and knowing that, the boys and stuff can go up on their bikes, and if they need us, there's always an opportunity for them to call us to keep safe, which is really good.
So is that how Charlie knew how to use the red phone box?
Yeah. So I'm Canadian, and so every day in England is like being a tourist, and so we would travel around the country during half terms with the kids, and there's always a phone box somewhere. So we would make a phone call and record the boys talking to their grandma on the phone, and so it obviously came in handy when he actually needed to make a real phone call. He knew how to do it.
I know that the phone box that you use was recently saved from disconnection. What difference would it make for you and the village where you live if that phone box went?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because I think, it's on the side of a road, and it's a staple in the UK. We see red phone boxes, tourists come to see the red phone boxes, but because it's always here, you actually forget what its purpose is. And if this phone box disappeared, and knowing that it is really difficult to get a signal where we are, it would be a huge, it would be detrimental for this area, to be fair. There's a lot of people that go mountain biking in Nibley. It's a well-known place to take their bikes, and just knowing that there is the safety of an old-fashioned phone box that you can make a call to, even to emergency services or wherever you need to call. I think losing this would be huge for this area.
That's Alicia and Charlie in the North Nibley phone box last night. They live in Charfield, a few miles away. BT owns and operates the vast majority of public payphones, and it says there's been a huge decline in their use, with the number of calls falling by around 90% in the last decade. It told us it continues to review the remaining phones, removing the ones that are no longer being used. Nigel Lynch is Professor Emeritus of Telecommunications at the University of Salford, and he knows all about the rules covering public phone boxes and who can keep one. Professor Lynch, the phone box in North Nibley that Charlie Garside uses, it's an old payphone, but you don't have to pay on it. The calls there are free. Does it cost BT a lot to provide them?
Hello, yes, this is part of the problem, of course. It's always cost money to provide telephone boxes on the high street. They've always suffered from vandalism, theft of coins. They need maintaining, painting, cleaning, and of course repairs. So yes, it does cost money to provide telephone boxes on the street. But in fact, they're obligated to do so because the regulator, Ofcom, have what's called a universal service obligation. And that applies to BT, except in the district of Hull, where telephones are provided by KCOM, and so it applies to KCOM in Hull. And part of that universal service obligation is the provision of public payphones. So they have to provide them.
What are the rules then? Where do they have to provide them exactly?
Well, they have to, but initially they had to provide them across the country, of course, and there were, at the peak in the 1990s, close to 150,000. So you can see how the number has dropped dramatically. Where they are, so the rules have changed now. So basically, they can remove phone boxes except in very special situation. And the one you've just cited there in North Nibley is a classic example. You've got a rural situation where mobile phone coverage is poor. So if a phone box is in a rural area and you do not have coverage from all 4 networks, there are 4 mobile phone networks in the UK. So unless you've got coverage from all 4 in an area, or if in fact it's in an area which has a high accident rate, if a phone box hasn't made 52 calls a year, that's 1 a week. So there are rules that say if it hasn't met these criterion, then you have to keep it. You have to keep it there. But if it has met those criterion, in other words, there's good mobile phone coverage, it's not an accident black spot and so on, then BT are allowed to consult about its removal.
You say consult, they have to consult, don't they, with the local council?
Yes, they do.
Do the rules cover all phone boxes, including the one in that train station that the listener who wrote to us was so sad about?
It's a very interesting question, that, because the Ofcom rules say these apply to phone boxes in public areas. Now, when you go onto a railway station, we'd have to check whether that is technically on land owned by the railway operator and company or in public space. If it's in a public space, the rules apply. But the railway station's an interesting one because it might not technically be a public place.
If people like Charlie and his mum are using the phone box because there isn't a good digital signal, what happens to these public pay phones when the whole system goes digital, and the old copper wires are no longer used?
Well, the two things will happen there. First of all, BT, and by the way, BT are not the only provider of public payphones. We also have New World Payphones, which is part of Clear Channel, and JC Decau. They all provide telephone boxes as well, but BT is the largest provider. BT have introduced a new form of phone box, which is not a red box. It's called a street hub. Those street hubs are already digital. So basically, the turning off of the analog telephone service won't have an effect on those. They're digital already. Other phone boxes do have to be converted. And again, as part of the universal service obligation, Ofcom expect BT to convert phone boxes to the digital voice service. So they will have to be converted, and that's another cost, of course, adding into that conversion process. So they will be maintained and operated, but they will have to, just as domestic phones have to be upgraded, they will have to be upgraded as well.
And it won't matter that the mobile signal is poor when these are upgraded to digital. It won't matter that the local mobile signal is poor.
No, because obviously it'll still be connected by, there'll still be a wire going into the phone box. It won't become a radio mobile phone box.
Okay.
It will still be connected by, one assumes they'll put a fibre cable in ultimately.
So
it still will be it'll still be wired rather than radio.
Thank you so much for explaining that, Professor Nigel Lynch. Thank you for that. I asked you for your memories, didn't I, of using these phone boxes. We've had some great emails, as I said. This one from Gary MacDonald. In the early days of the rave era, when raves were illegal, they were never advertised, and a phone number would be circulated with the time to call, and after that time there'd be a recorded message telling you where the rave was and how much it would cost to attend. He says you'd often see dozens of cars parked up around a phone box with even more teenagers. Once one person made the call, we'd all pile back into the car and head off to the rave, hopefully all under the radar of the authorities, we hoped at the time. Thanks so much for those. William Morris prints seem to be cropping up everywhere at the moment. Nearly 130 years after his death, his signature patterns of flowers, leaves and vines, they seem to be unfolding across everything, don't they? You can find them on wallpaper, dinnerware, clothes, phone cases. They're at every price point too. Whether you shop at John Lewis, Temu, Sainsbury's, you'll find something with a William Morris pattern on it. Mary Goldberg runs Stockwell Ceramics in Cornwall. It's a small business where they hand make ceramic buttons, and some of them feature William Morris designs. She told us how they make them and how people can't get enough of them.
Each button is its own tiny canvas, really, and we paint on them. We put ceramic transfers onto them. And when we started using transfers on our buttons, the transfers are fired on and they sink into the glaze. So they're fired to a very high temperature, so they're completely durable. But we were looking around for material to use and had a look at the William Morris things. We actually did some work, and we started to realise that these images had an enormous amount to give. And of course, with the advent of Photoshop, we're able to isolate little areas of the image. We were able to cut them out. We were able to have ceramic transfers made to go onto the buttons using sometimes just very small parts of the design. And for us, we just love them. It's just, there's so much there. There's always more and more and more. And we just became very involved with the William Morris designs. We send our buttons all over the world, particularly the Morris designs, the Strawberry Thief. We send them to Japan, we send them to America, we send them to Europe, and really we send them everywhere, Australia, New Zealand. We're a very small business, but we make thousands and thousands and thousands of buttons every year. And in our outlets, in the museums, we've noticed that the orders have increased hugely, and that the buttons that are definitely most popular are the William Morris arts and crafts range, really. I mean, we make buttons that are in the style of the arts and crafts movement, and we also use images which are directly from the arts and crafts movement. But in terms of the increase in sales, yes, it's been huge. Quite staggering, really.
Mary Goldberg from Stockwell Ceramics in Cornwall. So what is the enduring appeal then of William Morris? Why do his designs suddenly seem to have gone viral? And what might the man himself have made of it all? Hadrian Garrard is the director of the William Morris Gallery in London, and he recently curated an exhibition exploring this Morris mania. Hi, Hadrian, and welcome. Tell us then, who was William Morris? What was the arts and crafts movement?
Well, that's a good question. Hi, Winifred. Nice to be here. So William Morris was a writer, a poet, an artist, a businessman, and a political activist. He was working at the height of the Industrial Revolution. So he was born in 1834 in Walthamstow, where we're now based, where we're in his former childhood home here. And yeah, he was someone tackling issues that we still haven't got to grips with today. So he was really concerned about the impact on the environment of mass production. He was worried about people having too much stuff around them. He was worried about the experience of working in a factory and the experience of labour and work. And he thought it was really important that people had a closer relationship with nature. So these are things that have never been more prescient, but he was worrying about these things about 130 years ago.
And the movement then, it was to preserve arts and crafts, old things, old skills.
Partly, I think, I mean, arts and crafts is a difficult thing to really put your finger on, but essentially in a world of increased mass production and increased mechanisation, it was this concern that we're losing essential crafts, we're losing hand skills, and we're losing that relationship with the natural world. So it was a movement that's still, I mean, it's still going very strong in that sense. So it's, yeah, really trying to live more in harmony with the things around you, and surround yourself with things that have been made with joy and with skill and with love. And I think that's something we still think about a lot today.
The inspiration for his designs, you know, these sinuous interlocking leaves and flowers and vines, they kind of look un-English, don't they? Chintz, I suppose, to my eye, looks English. These don't. Where did the inspiration come from?
That's a great question. I mean, we did a show last year about William Morris's relationship with art from the Islamic world, and you know, it turns out that the most quintessentially English designer was deeply influenced by art from the Ottoman Empire, from what was then Persia. He was a collector of Persian carpets and actually an advisor to the V&A on their collecting of Islamic art. So these are the things that he lived with, that he studied. So when we think about Morris, he's designing from a global perspective, and I think that's one of the reasons his designs remain so popular. So he's drawing from the English countryside, but he's very influenced by other cultures, and also other cultures from South Asia as well.
Why? What would he have made then of the idea that his stuff is just everywhere on everything for everyone?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag. So I think on one hand, he'd be really happy that his work and his designs are truly accessible, and they are, you know, they're now things that you can buy on the high street. They're not luxury goods, and this is something that really troubled him in his lifetime, because he paid his work as well. He used brilliant materials. He didn't scrimp at all on making his designs and making his objects. But the result was that the only people that can afford to buy his work were the upper middle classes, and this is something that he found increasingly frustrated. He was increasingly frustrated throughout his life, and basically dedicated the last 15 years of his life advocating for socialist revolution. So that was kind of his trajectory. So I think he'd be pleased they're accessible, but I think he'd be troubled by the overproduction of his work and some of the ways that things are made, where they're made, and the experience of people making those objects and the potential damage to the environment. So I think it's a mixed bag. But he was living in a very different time, and it's quite, you know, it's tempting to think about what would Morris think today, but the world has changed.
Of course, we'll never know what he thought when he's not here. What about the copyright then? Is it just out of copyright? Can just anybody now use it? That must be so. It's everywhere, as I said.
To some extent, I mean, 70 years after, you know, any artist's death, your work goes out of copyright. So in a sense, yes, you can find a sort of digital download of a Morris print and make something if you want. But I mean, what we do here at the gallery, as I say, we have the world's largest collection of his work. So we work with really great makers, so people like Liberty and Urkel, and you know, people in the UK and Europe that are making things well. We license patterns to them, and they can come to the source, so they can work from design drawings, from working with our curators here. So we try and promote things that are, you know, beautifully made in the spirit of Morris. And an example of that, I guess, would be, we think we've got the best Christmas decorations on sale in the UK at the moment, which are these beautiful baubles, fair traded, and they're made in India by artisans there, and they're really beautiful special
We're very
things.
tempted. We're tempted to come along and have a look. That was very good advertising, just chucked in at the end. Hadrian Garrard, director of the William Morris Gallery in London. Thank you for that. There's no You and Yours tomorrow. Evan Davis is here just after the 12 o'clock news with the bottom line. But then there is at 12:30 a sliced bread with Greg Foote from the You and Yours team. He is looking at fake tan. Does paying more mean you will get a better, more even glow? Thank you for listening today.